Today I'm going to walk you through the economic basics of a residential food scrap collection service. We'll examine a spreadsheet I've made that calculates the expenses, the gross profit, and the profit margin of that service. And then we'll see how that can be a tool to help you assess the ongoing financial health of that service and to make informed decisions about expenses and pricing. And for those of you who haven't yet started that service but are interested in that kind of business, I'll show you how this can help you determine a meaningful price to start with, and more importantly, to decide whether or not you should launch that service in your market at all. If you're not comfortable with spreadsheets, I assure you this is a basic one. I'll walk you through it, but I also encourage you to develop some competency with spreadsheets. They're useful, of course, for financial decision making, and I also use them to help me handle the data that I collect in operations as well. Okay.
Here we are. This spreadsheet calculates our expenses, our gross profit, and our gross profit margin for a residential food scrap collection service on a monthly basis. And before we start to put a bunch of numbers in here and here and here and down here, let me briefly go over each section. The first section is the expenses, again on a monthly basis. Here we have a list of the expenses you'll have, and for each one a description that tells where the numbers are coming from. As we get to each one and populate this with numbers, I'll explain that a little more. But notice, of course, we have labor. You may well be doing the pickups and the washing of the buckets yourself. Wear and tear on the vehicle. Notice that we don't have fuel, we don't have maintenance, because all of that will be included in wear and tear. This is called the standard mileage rate allowed by the IRS, which currently is 62.5 cents per mile. Liners, compostable liners, if you provide those to your customers, and I encourage that you do, it makes it less messy for them and a lot quicker for you to wash the buckets. You'll still have to wash them, but it'll be a lot better. And yeah, the bucket, the lid, the sticker, they don't last forever. And if you're like me, you're going to get a fair amount of them stolen. So what are the replacement costs on that? Calculated on a monthly basis. And then a lot of services like this give some compost back, give discounts of compost back to the customers because they're participating in this recycling. So I'll, like I say, I'm going to put in numbers for what my current service is. We'll also talk about, if you're new to the game, and even if you're not, how these can change over time. Now this section down here, we're going to use the expenses number that we generate in the top. But down here, we'll go ahead and we'll calculate gross revenue, and then with the expenses that we calculate up above, we'll get our gross profit, and we'll also list that on a per hour basis, and the gross profit if you do the pickups and the washing yourself, so without having the labor expense, and that also on an hourly basis. And then from these numbers in this section, we'll be able to calculate your gross profit margin, right? And again, that same profit margin if you're the one doing all the work. Now this section down here is specifically about the compostable liners that you might provide to your customers, right? And what we calculate here will help us with this expense up here, right? And you can do a similar breakdown for other expenses like buckets, but I just did it for liners. Okay, let's go ahead and put in our put in some numbers, for my current service that I offer. Now, the labor, again, these are all the hours in a month that are devoted to the roots, running around getting these buckets and washing these buckets, and then multiplied by the labor cost per hour. And we're going to revisit that as well. But the total hours is about 102. Okay, it's about 2.5 days a week. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that you pay someone $16 an hour. Now, it could be well above, it could be below that. For here, we're going to have to go well above. But for now, let's say it's $16 an hour. That won't be your cost. That's what you're paying them. But for things like withholding and workers' compensation insurance, things like that, you want to take whatever you pay someone and multiply it by 1.4 for your cost. So when we do that with $16 an hour, we actually get $22.40. Now, this is going to be a dollar amount. So this whole column, we'll go ahead and say, I guess I had done that earlier, a dollar amount. So our total labor expense for the month is the number of hours times the cost per hour. And the way we enter that is you put an equal sign, and notice that this cell is E5. So E5 and then an asterisk, which means multiplication, times F5, right? And it's, instead of just putting the number in, it's good for us to put in that equation so that whenever we want to change these numbers to see how things have changed, maybe the route is shorter or longer, or as I said, this number will have to go up for what you pay. And yeah, you can see what that equation is up here. Okay, let's move along. Now, the wear and tear on the vehicle, again, total miles per month for me, 612. My routes are not as dense and as efficient as I hope that yours are. And then we put in 62.5 cents. Okay, notice it rounded it to that, but it knows that we meant 62.5 cents. Now, we also want to multiply this. So what we do is I highlight it, I copy it with Control C, and I paste it into here with Control V. Okay, and we're going to keep doing that the whole way down. Okay, now the liners. The number of participants in our service, our customers, times the cost of the liners per month. And as I said, see below. Okay, so let's come down here to the liners section. I've got two different sizes of liners. The 13-gallon easily fill up a 5-gallon bucket. What's called a 5-gallon compostable liner isn't near enough somehow for the 5-gallon bucket. So this people use if they have an indoor container, right? So people will either have this one or this one. Now, the price per liner, 28 cents for the 13-gallon, and I think 15 cents for the 5-gallon. And these are both dollar amounts. Okay, now the number used in a week, if it's the full 13-gallon, it's just one per week. If it's 5-gallon, I found that people often use about 3. Some use 4, some use 2, right? In the weeks in a month, how many weeks are there? We're going to say 4.4 weeks in a month. Okay, now the monthly cost is going to be, if it's this kind of liner, the price for each one, how many used in a week, and how many weeks per month. So we're going to say this equals B33, that cell, times C33 times D33. And again, by putting it in like this, if we experiment with those numbers later, we can see how it changes. Now, I don't want to do the suggested thing, but yeah, we're going to have the same thing here. So I copy this, I paste it here. Now, so basically, if a customer uses the big liners in a month, it's gonna cost me that much. If they use a small liner, it's that much. So I always like to err on the less optimistic side, so there are less surprises. So let's assume that this is what the cost per customer per month for the liners is, $198. So that's the number we're going to use up here. Number of participants, for me, 181 households. Okay, the cost per liner. Again, this might change over time, so I'm going to put in this cell. This cell is E34, so I'm going to say I want this to equal E34. Okay, and it automatically puts in whatever I have here. Okay, now again, my monthly cost for liners is how many participants times the cost per participant. So the same equation that we had up here, we want applied to the liners. Okay, good. Now the bucket, the lid, the stickers, right? How many participants do we have? If we swap out a clean one for each dirty one, we need to have 2 buckets for each participant. Although in fact, you may not need quite that many because you'll be washing several days a week. And I found that they lasted at least 2 years, and I think confidently over 3. So we're going to say 36 months for 3 years. Then I multiply it times $13 because currently, that might change, but for now, the bucket, the lid, and the sticker add up to 13. Okay, so here I'm going to say this is going to be equal to 181 for my participants times 2 for 2 buckets divided by 36. And it gives me this goofy number. I'll leave it. And then $13 is how much each set of bucket, lid, and sticker costs. Copy, paste. So yeah, that number times the number, the cost of a bucket, lid, and sticker gives me that. So what this number here is the total monthly cost to me about replacing bucket, lid, and sticker. Okay, free bags of compost. I give away 2 bags that are pretty heavy, pretty big bags, 50 pounds or more. But not everyone wants them, right? So it's been my experience that about 1/3 of my customers want them. So the number of participants divided by 3, I give away 2 a year to those who want it, and then divided by 12 because we're doing this on a monthly basis. And then that times the opportunity cost per bag. So here, it's actually going to end up the same as the one above it. 181 participants divided by 3 because only 1/3 of them. But then multiplied by 2 because there are 2 bags that I give away. And then divided by 12 months. Okay, and it happens to be the same number just because of, well, 3 times 12 is equal to 36. Okay, now the opportunity cost per bag. I sell out of these bags. So every time I give one away to a customer, it's that much money of revenue that I'm not getting. So it's a cost to me of $13.70. And again, we're going to copy this. So on a monthly basis, my expense of giving away free bags of compost is $138. Okay, the product discount. I also give away 50% off the next $100 worth that a customer would want to buy if they're participating in this service. And last year that turned out to be, let me look at my notes here, $1,409 that I gave away for that of compost. So I'm going to say equal to $1,409, but again, we want it on a monthly basis. So that, okay. Now, so these are the expenses. And again, notice there's no fuel here because it's all included in this. No maintenance on the truck, it's included in this. So our total monthly expenses, I highlight all of this and I click on the sum, and it will add it all up for me. Then I hit return. Okay, that's my expenses per month for conducting this collection service. Okay, good. So now I come down to the next section, the gross revenue from the service. Simply, how many people are participating in the service and how much do I charge them? Got 181 people participating. I charge them $20 a month. Okay, so again, I'm going to copy this same formula that's going to multiply these two together. That's my overall revenue, right? Now the expenses of the service, or COGS, cost of goods sold, we already calculated here. And instead of just putting that number here, we want to tell it to put whatever number ends up being in here. That way, if we need to change any of our expenses numbers, it will automatically update this. So that cell is G12. So I just say equals G12 and it knows to put it in there. Now, the gross profit, as you might imagine, is what we take in versus what we have to sell. So for that cell, we want to say equal G16 minus G17. Okay? And per hour, we take that, and again, we know how many hours we're spending, 102, right? So we take this cell, which is G19, equals G19, and we divide it by, what is this cell? E5. Again, that way if we change anything, it will automatically update it. Now, let's take a quick look at this. The gross profit per hour, okay, that's not all the money that's being paid. This is after we pay, again, not only all of these expenses, but including the person who's doing the pickup. So what if you're like me and you're doing the pickups? Then we add this number back in, right? So the gross profit without the labor expense is the gross profit, so we say equals G19, but I need to add that labor expense back in because, plus G5, because I'm getting that too, because I'm doing the pickups. And again, we take that same number, we want to see what it is per hour, so that's G22, and we divide it by, what was the labor? It was in cell E5. Okay, so now that doesn't look so bad. May not be great, but it's not so bad. Now, the gross profit margin, okay, is actually a very straightforward calculation. We take the gross profit, which we found right here, and we divide it by the gross revenue, which is everything that we're getting from our customers. So gross profit was, that's equal G19, and we divide it by G16. Okay, now it might put it in as a decimal, but I'd already told it to put it in as a percent, right? Okay, now what if we're, again, I'm doing all the work, so we're not going to count labor expense. So I'm going to take this, which is G22. G22 divided by G16. That looks a lot better. Okay, now, what do these mean? What's good, what's bad? This is positive, right? So even after paying someone this much of this percentage of your revenue is going back into your business or into your pocket if you happen to need money to live on. The problem is that it's not a whole lot, right? And actually, if it's 10 or less, it's not considered a very profitable business. You want it at least 20. And this, of course, looks better. But again, that's with me running around doing all the pickups. And the problem with that is I need to be at my facility. You might be in the same situation. I need to be processing this. So I was having uh, difficulty with this because I thought I would hire someone again in the spring to do this. As you know, inflation has gone way up, and around here, there'd be no way that I could hire someone dependable for under $20. So that's why I come back up here. If it's $20 that I'm paying someone, but actually the cost to me with the other costs associated with employing someone is 1.4 times that, 1.4 times 20 is 28. So now this spreadsheet's very helpful. I see what happens if I do hire someone at 28, or I hire them at 20, but it costs me $28. I change that to 28. It changes my labor cost, which adds to the total expenses, right? And then the gross profit is now negative. That means if I hire someone at that rate that I think I'm going to have to, I'm losing money every week, right? In fact, I'm losing $363 a month. And here we see it as a negative 10% gross profit. Problem. It's a problem. This hasn't changed because this is the number if I do it all myself. But as I said, I need to be getting back to the facility. So knowing that, I can make some decisions. I can say, well, it's inflation time. I just have to raise my price like everyone else. So that's why I can try a few other numbers. Well, what if I raise it to 25? Everything gets updated automatically. If I raise it to 25, okay, at least I'm I'm positive again, right? And my profit margin is 12. Again, not great, and it makes me nervous because prices continue to go up. And it's not just labor that goes up. Liners sometimes have spiked up. Certainly, anything associated with the vehicle can go up. So you don't want to just get a number where you think, well, at least it isn't negative, because it will be negative before too long. There are other choices you can make. Of course, you could just make that more. Maybe I take it to 28. That seems to help. Now my gross profit margin is 21%, which is what a lot of business people would go ahead and call profitable. Maybe I want more cushion, I go to 30 or 35. It looks better. The problem is, are my customers going to accept that price? I don't think so. They're supportive, but at some point they're going to start to drop off. And if I go to 30, well, what if I lose 30 of my customers, right? Anyhow, let me undo that. Another choice you could make, you could say, well, I'll raise it just a little bit to 25. But these free bags of compost, maybe that would be an add-on. Maybe someone who pays 25, they don't get free bags of compost, as an example. So I make that 0. Okay, and I see how that affects my gross profit margin. Anyhow, you can see how once you've got this set up, you can change the numbers to be reasonable or to reflect something you're worried about increasing, and see how that affects you. Now I'll go ahead and tell you, my decision on what I decided to do in this situation is I am actually going to back out of after 7 years, I'm backing out of the residential collection, and happily some enterprising high schoolers are going to take it over because they don't have to make as much money as a person who has to support a family or anything like that. They're excited about it, and also the part that they're going to take over is not the whole set of roots, but just the very dense parts of the roots. So their spreadsheets that I shared with them are much better because they are much more efficient as far as mileage and hours, right?
Okay, great. But what if you haven't started yet? You want to start a business like this. You think that it might be economically viable, but you don't have these numbers yet. Which of these numbers can you use, and which ones are you going to have to come up with, and how do you do that? Happily, a few of them I think you can just copy. The numbers for the compostable liners, just take what I have here to start off with. As a business that is a community composting business, you should qualify for the same discounts that I do. Likewise, that 62.5 cents a mile, that's an IRS number, so that applies to you as well. But then the other ones, important ones, like labor, number of miles on your route, and the hours that it takes. Those you're going to have to come up with as good an estimate as you can. Now, for what you're going to pay for someone, you don't want to think entry level. Remember, this is a person who's going to be on the road a lot. You want someone who is a very experienced driver, a safe person. Also, think of insurance. Someone might be very reliable, but if they're young, you're going to get dinged for insurance. You will anyway, but it'll be worse. So I recommend that you talk to someone who is at least mid-20s, late 20s, has a decent job that they've held for quite a while. Ask them how much they make, how much they would accept. And then remember, you have to multiply that by 1.4 to get the cost to you. Now, what about miles and hours that are going to be taken up in a month? Don't be like me. Don't say, I'm going to start with this city and get participants wherever I can. Asking for trouble. You're asking for inefficiency. Pick a densely populated area that for some reason you feel is particularly supportive of this idea. Maybe you've been to farmers markets or other events where you have talked to people and they love the idea. But you want dense population, right? Drive a meaningful back and forth route in that area. Go slow. And you also want to allow, when you're keeping track of the miles it takes, and especially the time that it takes, give at least 1.5 minutes for each stop. How many stops? Well, that depends partly on the vehicle you have. I can get 70 buckets in my truck, but I've got an 8-foot bed. Also, you don't know how many people in this area will go for it, but you have to assume and you have to communicate that you need a lot of people, or else you're not going to be able to do the service. In a neighborhood like mine, you might want to say, I'm going to calculate an average of 3 people per block, as an example. Anyhow, with those admittedly general numbers, you put it in here, and the price, we always think, well, let's ask what people will accept as a price. It's going to be low in all likelihood, right? Put the numbers you can come up with, even though they're estimates, into this spreadsheet and play with price numbers here until you get a 20% profit margin, right? And when you have that price, then go to the farmers markets, meet the people, heck, even do things on social media or even mailers or some door-to-door. I did some of that. And let people know in this area, they support the idea. Let them know you need X number of people, maybe even people who put down a deposit so they commit. That many participants you need, and you need it at that price. And if they won't accept that price, don't you go under, because then you won't be able to keep your business going. You're going to have to come up with an acceptable number of participants to begin and an acceptable price to you. And if the community supports it, then you launch it. If they don't, then maybe you should not. If the enthusiasm and the commitment of the community is enough for you to start this service, fantastic. But as soon as you get started, please collect the real numbers that you generate. How many liners are people using? How many buckets are getting lost or stolen? Hopefully none. Certainly, how long is it actually taking you to do the route, to do the washing, and to take it to where it needs to go, the facility, maybe your facility or someone else's? And as soon as you start to have better numbers, real numbers, within a month, within 2 months, you're going to have a much better picture of how profitable or not your endeavor is. And you'll be able to make the changes you need to make to keep your business sustainable.